Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. Having a dream and a goal for your life is one thing, but creating a clear strategy that you can execute to bring that dream to life is quite another. Well, today we're going to sit down with fellow entrepreneur and Austinite Ryan Moran. You know, Ryan and I have quite a bit in common. We both started our first businesses in college. We both made our first $1 million by learning how to market products and services online. And within the last couple of years, we've both felt the need to move beyond our solopreneur-based businesses and to start dreaming bigger and to start doing something greater. That is exactly what we're going to talk about here today, why you should dream bigger and how to strategically create and then execute a plan to bring that dream to life. Personally, my dream is to build a $100 million company in the food production space in the next 36 months so that I can buy a race car team and go race in the 24-hour of Le Mans, which is my big dream. And Ryan's, well, his lifelong dream is to really empower a new generation of entrepreneurs so that they have the skills and abilities to create companies that will have a huge impact on the world moving forward. And as for Ryan's reward, well, he is going to buy the Cleveland Indians. And while most people would never be willing to think that big with any amount of real belief that they could actually accomplish that goal, as you're about to find out, Ryan is quite serious. And the decisions that he's making today and the actions that he's taking are all aligned to help him realize that goal 20 years from now. So this is an extremely powerful episode that's going to show you how to do the same thing to help you start thinking bigger and then to teach you and show you how to put a plan together to bring that dream to life. With that being said, please welcome Ryan Moran. Good afternoon, Mike Dillard here, and welcome back to Self-Made Man, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking with Ryan Moran, who is joining me here from the other side, not of the planet, but of Austin, Texas. So, Ryan, welcome to the show.
Mike, thank you so much for having me on. I really respect what you guys are doing here, and it's an honor to be involved.
Oh, absolutely, brother. Thank you so much. And I'm excited about our interview today because we are going to be talking about your plan to execute, you know, what some might consider the impossible. And that is really going to be the theme of today's show, which is how can you execute a mission that is so grand in your personal life or on your agenda, what you are put here on this planet to do. How can you think bigger than you've ever thought before? And then how do you turn that thought and that plan into a reality? How do you execute on it? And this is something that you have been putting together for yourself and your vision over the last couple of years. And you have this giant, crazy goal at the end of this process for you to one day own the Cleveland Indians, kind of like Gary Vaynerchuk's vision or goal of owning the New York Jets.
Right.
And the way that you're going to get there is by changing the world for the better and making a huge impact on a ton of people's lives. And what I find most fascinating is that you have actually started to execute this plan. In fact, it's going to be kicked off here in Austin, Texas in the next couple of weeks. So I thought it'd be awesome if you could come on the show and let us know how you did that, kind of step by step. But first and foremost, I'd like to give the audience a chance to get to know you, what you've done in the past, and how you ended up to where you are here today.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I started as an entrepreneur out of Cleveland, Ohio, which is why I'm a Cleveland Indians fan. Who else would want to own an embarrassing baseball team besides somebody who grew up in Cleveland, Ohio? But I grew up in a very blue-collar family. I don't know what genetic mutation happened that made me a crazy entrepreneur, what made me wired that way. But I achieved pretty impressive success actually in my college dorm room, had a six-figure business and thought I was awesome. I thought everything that I touched would turn to gold. I had kind of, glory child syndrome, I suppose, where I just assumed that everything would be easy and golden from the time that I started my business because it started off successful fairly out of the gate. And I had the thought and the feeling that I just wanted to accumulate as much money as possible so that I could be free and secure to do whatever the heck I want from then on out. And it was this perspective that, as I've talked about more, I've discovered that other entrepreneurs and really other men have experienced or thought about, which is I've got this obstacle that is standing in front of me and the money. I've got to get through the obstacle to get the money so that I can then do whatever the heck I want. And so the pursuit was always about money. The pursuit was always about extracting, and it was about getting. And before we dive into that more, full disclosure, I like money. I like to have it. I want to have as much of it as possible. And I think there's enough for everybody, and I believe in abundance. But operating from that perspective of I've got to chase the money, for some reason, really breakout success eluded me. It seemed to always run away from me as I chased it. And not only that, but worse, but it left me feeling really empty because it was an aimless goal to just get more and more in order to feel safe and secure. And that left me really lonely and depressed.
Well, I have to ask you, so you started that business in college, you said, correct?
Right.
And then how old were you when you started to kind of have this realization, or how old are you today?
I'm 28 now. I was probably 21, 22 when I really burnt out on my pursuit of money.
Yeah, I was going to say, from what I've seen and what I've personally experienced, you tend to have a major shift about every 8 to 10 years in your career or in your life, whatever it may be. You tend to go through these phases. And I can remember all of the guys that I've, started with over my career over the last 10 years, and where we started 10 years ago and where we are today, it's completely different.
Yeah.
And I just think it's this natural progression where you really have to start in that place, which is to start with the money aspect, because that is the lever or the mechanism that allows you to then move to the next phase and change your priorities if that's something that you're inspired to do. So it's been interesting that you've gone through that same shift.
I have. And also that fuel, I call it fuel, that the pain I felt when I realized that I got what I thought I wanted and it was empty, also is what prompted me to pursue something bigger and better and more selfless. And I've seen other entrepreneurs and other men experience that same shift too.
Very good. And just to satisfy people's curiosity, you don't have to get into it in detail, but what kind of business, have you built or did you start with, and that really kind of gave you that initial bout of success?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to talk about it, so let's go into it. I was actually one of those annoying make money online guys in college. And the reason for that was my first ever money-making venture was I started a blog from my college dorm room where I started selling other people's products and getting a commission for it. I got really good at search engine marketing, specifically marketing on Google, and I made hundreds of thousands of dollars doing that. And people kind of got to know me as somebody who was good at that. And so all of my friends who were really successful, I was doing 6 figures, but the people who were doing 7 figures and up were all telling me, you got to do a training and you got to teach people, and that's where you really scale business. And so I did that, and I hated every single minute of it. I felt like I was fake. I felt like it was phony. I felt like I had to drive products and services down people's throats. And I hated every single minute of that. And I did it for 3 or 4 years or so until one day I said, I can't do this another day. And I just shut the business down, put pages up on our websites that said I've retired, and I was done. And I walked away from that, and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I was going to go in a different direction.
Well, you got to continue the story. What did you end up doing next?
So from that point, I had developed a specific network. So I had certain really strategic contacts, and I didn't know where I was going to take my life in business. All I knew is that I wanted to run away from what I had been doing. And it was actually right around that time that I moved to Austin, Texas. I had been living in Cleveland, Ohio. I felt like I needed to change my life and my businesses. So I literally threw everything that I owned into my car, and I drove to Austin, Texas, and rented a month-to-month apartment sight unseen, and decided to build a new network and a new business plan and go in a different direction. So the first thing that I did was I wrote down a list of people that I said, okay, I hate the people I'm hanging out with. I hate the network I have. I hate the joint venture partners and the business people that I'm hanging out with now. Who would I actually want to hang out with? Who would I actually want to become more like? Who would I actually want to learn from? Who might I want to be partnered with in future businesses? And I made a list of about 25 people, and I wrote a handwritten note to every single one and called every single one and just said, I'm going in a new direction, and you're one of those people that I wanted to spend more time with, and I would really like to foster a deeper relationship with you. And that was just me planting seeds for new businesses. And during that process, I became friends with someone who was following a business model that he taught that model to me. And I called an old business partner and I said, how would you feel about starting a new business? And we started some new physical products businesses that we then started marketing pretty heavily using the skill sets I had learned in the previous businesses, and scaled that into a multi-million-dollar venture in about 1.5 to 2 years. And during that time, kind of like you, I started my podcast, which is called Freedom Fastlane, where I just started talking about my experience of what I wish I had avoided, how I view life differently now that I've gone through a business I hated and am now building a business that I love. And what was interesting is as soon as I stopped operating from a place of I'm trying to take something, and it was just, I have a message that I want to share with the world, really interesting clients and prospects started to show up because I had no more front anymore. There was no more me trying to get something. There were no more walls up. And I finally got to show up as myself in my businesses. And that opened up completely new possibilities for me.
Awesome. Awesome. So is that a business that you're still building today, or has that kind of moved to the wayside?
Yeah, I still own those businesses. They're fairly automated now. We have teams and systems in place now where they're fairly automated, which is actually a big shift for me as an entrepreneur, because now for the first time it feels like I'm working on businesses rather than spending my day working in my businesses, and that has been a complete shift for me.
That's a tough transition. It is one I still struggle with myself. How did you make that transition? Is there someone you learned from, a book that you read, a workshop that you went to, or was it just trial and error?
There was a big shift for me when I recognized that the money that was in the bank account was not my money, it was the business's money. And the only way that I was able to make that shift was when I got over this need for just constant security. I see a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with or train that are always just trying to get more and more safe or extract as much money from their businesses as possible. And that wasn't serving me because I couldn't make really smart investments in my company if I was always trying to extract every dollar from myself. So I finally just said, okay, you know what? $100,000 in the bank is going to allow me to recover if anything ever goes wrong. And that's what I put in the bank. And I came up with an investment plan for the rest of the funds. And then I decided all other funds that are made in the business, I'm going to reinvest into building a team, into going into places that we've never gone before and taking strategic risks and operating from that place of, I'm okay if I swing for the fences and I miss. That freed me up to actually build the type of business that I was proud of rather than just doing things because I thought that they would be profitable. It also allowed me to move away from opportunities that I didn't want to do, but I would have done normally if they were just for the money. And when I separated myself from the business, defined what I needed to feel safe so that I could take those strategic risks, that's when I built a team and really started automating a business so that I was free from being stuck in the weeds of my businesses.
Yeah, that's a great mental transition. And then when it comes to acquiring the actual skill set of working on the business, was that just trial and error for you, or did you learn that somewhere? Let's just say from somebody like Dan, strategic coach.
Dan Sullivan, I think, is like the smartest entrepreneurial coach. I actually just joined his group within a week and a half. So you must have a psychic ability this week, Mike.
well, he's like the godfather for all of us solo entrepreneurs who are making that transition. Dan Sullivan is the guy that everybody's gone to, and I've been a part of Strategic Coach, and he's actually going to be on the show here fairly shortly. So
yeah, I'm jealous of you. I think he is an absolute genius. But I wish that I could say that I had a mentor or I had a coach or I had a big transition point that gave me the skills to do that. Mine was trial and error. I just decided I'd hire some people, make some mistakes, and learn along the way. I've operated from the place of I know that I'll delay action in business and in life if I feel like I have to get it all figured out. And I'll get bogged down in information overload if I pursue it in that way. I personally know I have to make mistakes and learn from them in order to even take action. So I took a lot of really imperfect action, hired a lot of really hires that were not a fit. The big switch finally happened when I found that kind of right-hand person who had been a part of teams or built teams before and could help screen out my bad ideas when it came to hires, when it came to ideas in the business, and really kept me reined in as far as spending, hiring, making hires of people that I thought I liked but really weren't fits. Having that invested opinion as a right-hand person, when I hired that person who's my vice president, that was a big shift for me because then I built the team around that person. So finding that strategic right-hand person was probably the biggest shift I had to going in the right direction.
Great. Very good. So let's talk about your vision and what inspired you to create it, what it is exactly, and how you guys basically backwards engineered it and have actually started to execute this plan right now.
Well, the way that you say it makes it sound a lot cooler than I think about it in my head. So thank you for that compliment. But my dream as a little kid was to be the general manager of the Cleveland Indians. When I was in elementary school and middle school, I was just fascinated with the trading process and the free agent signing process of Major League Baseball. I liked that more than going to the games and watching them. That front office process was just fascinating to me. But when I was in high school, I was actually very involved in a very fundamentalist religious upbringing. And I was kind of programmed, and I believed, either consciously or unconsciously, that I was doing a bad thing, that it was wrong, that it was even sinful for me to pursue something that I liked so much, and I should really just go into the ministry and I should become a pastor. That was that's another story in and of itself, because I'm no longer a religious person. But that process of pursuing something out of guilt made me pursue something in college that ultimately, I mean, I don't have the resume to go be in the front office of the Cleveland Indians. But when I came full circle and left that part of my life, the very fundamentalist religious part of my life, that dream didn't go away. And I realized that I could use my skill set to still achieve a dream like that, but probably not as the general manager, but as the owner, because I'm an entrepreneur and there are certain paths. There are other entrepreneurs who have achieved a level high enough in order to buy a Major League Baseball team. So why the heck not me? It has to be somebody. And my first thought in that process of I'm going to own this team and I'm going to turn them into a World Series winner feels impossible. And my 20s have really been about relearning about what is possible, because the only thing that are impossible are the things that we believe are impossible. 20 years ago, it was impossible for me to have a device in my pocket that took pictures, made phone calls all over the world, and surfed the internet, which was in its infant stages. That was impossible, and yet most of us have that in our pocket. So my goal now has just been to demystify that path. And what I've realized is that I demystify that more and more, and I grow as an entrepreneur and as a business person more and more as I surround myself with others who are beyond me, who have accomplished more, and getting around those who have gone beyond the level that I want and need to be in order to achieve a goal like that.
Very good. So, let's get into, above and beyond, the Cleveland and the sports team, which is kind of like your personal motivator, right?
Right.
In order to do that, you've got to provide a lot of value to a lot of people. You've got to make a massive impact on the planet. So how are you going to pull that off?
Well, the first piece of that has been just recognizing that the fastest route to incredible entrepreneurial success or financial success, I should say, is becoming an entrepreneur and really just owning your own value and disconnecting that belief that you are rewarded for your time or rewarded for a thing you do. You are rewarded for the impact that you can make. And that might seem redundant to a man who already owns his own value and recognizes that. But for me, that was a big shift, because then the question comes up, okay, where do I provide the most value? Where do I need to strategically organize my life and my time in order to operate only in that place? Before I made that distinction, most of my thought power as an entrepreneur would go to what's going to make the most money. That's an okay question to ask, but what that did for me anyway was anytime a shiny object or an opportunity would come up and I perceived that it would make more money or somebody else had made more money, I would think it would be a good idea for me. And that hasn't been the case in my experience. Instead, when I ask the question, okay, how do I strategically structure my time so that I only am doing the things where I provide the most value and I really hone in on those skill sets? That's going to put me in the best position for leverage in order to meet the best contacts, in order to make the best investments, and to have the best opportunities show up for me. And the truth of the matter is, I can only see like 12 months down the road. But I believe, and I've seen this in other people's lives, that as I head down that route of honing in where I provide the most value and I meet that network that will open up the 3-year plan and the 10-year plan, that all of a sudden that will become illuminated. So for me, I know I make the best impact and the most value in investing and advising companies and making strategic changes in those companies very, very quickly. As a part of that, I am starting to see that the billion-dollar companies or even the $100 million companies usually aren't the ones that I've been working with up until this point. So I have certain skill sets that have been very valuable to me, but I've realized in the last 12 months or so that the types of businesses I've been involved in aren't the ones that are going to take me where I need to go. And that has, following a goal at the end, which is to own a $1 billion sports franchise, I know I need to pivot and take that same skill set and apply it to something else. And that's when I started changing my network and testing new things in order to bring me over to a different part of that path.
So one of the things that you and I talked about earlier was that Peter Diamandis and his books Bold and Abundance played a part in inspiring you to think bigger. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, he starts the book Bold talking about certain industries that are being disrupted. And I love that word of disruption. And I think there are two very different types of businesses. And in kind of the you can do it entrepreneurial world, we tend to only talk about those small cash flow businesses. What's going to free you up? What's going to allow you to quit your job? But the real breakthrough companies, the ones that really change the world and create the biggest impact, are those disruptors, are the ones that do something very differently. And they're riskier in the sense that fewer of them really break through. And a lot of times they're more expensive to start, but they do create that big impact. And they do change the most people's lives. And as a result, they often have the highest valuations. And so when that conversation switches from how do I get the most money to how do I disrupt a marketplace in order to provide the most value, that's a completely different part of your brain to exercise. And I was even reading a part of Bold, Peter's book this morning, where he was talking about flow and how flow state, that feeling of being charged up and like you can do anything, comes from exercising parts of your brain that don't often get exercised by asking really weird questions. Like asking the question, how do I tackle this problem from a place that I've never had to think about before? I think the example that he used was mining on asteroids and asking the question, how do we travel to the moon, or how do we get to these asteroids? Most people don't have to exercise that part of their brain. But when they do, all of a sudden new parts of the brain start to light up and come up with creative ideas. And that's a very energizing process. So one of the things I practice regularly is just asking myself those weird questions. What if I had to turn this project into a $1 billion company? What would I have to do if I wanted to impact 10 million people? What would I do if we were going to disrupt this marketplace? And questions I don't know the answer to, but I start to journal about and think about in order to just stretch parts of my brain that I haven't had to think about before.
Yeah, unbelievably powerful. So where does this leave you now today? Do you have this plan? Is it a plan in process? Do you have your idea to disrupt an industry? Where are you exactly?
So for me, where I am now is I'm planting certain seeds that I think will lead me further down that path of $1 billion valuation. I journal every morning, and one of the things that I journal about as a goal of mine is to be able to just see the $1 billion path. I think I mentioned to you that I'm pretty comfortable operating in that $5 to $10 million a year area. But to be fully transparent, that $1 billion valuation or that $1 billion plan, it's still not clear to me yet. So the way that I creatively think about this and say, okay, how do I demystify this impossible idea? Because all I can see is like $5 or $10 million, which is great if that's where you want to be. But if I'm going to go after this seemingly impossible dream, what am I going to have to do to demystify what that next level is for me? And for me, the way that I've done that is just strategically position myself around the Peter D. Manises of the world and those who think very differently. The Jeff Hoffmans of the world, he's the founder of Priceline.com, was become an acquaintance of mine. The Gary Vaynerchuks of the world, who's on similar path as me to own a major league sports team. You know, we live in this world where we can access anybody. We can talk to pretty much anybody around the world. We can listen to Tony Robbins all day if we want to. And we, as a result, have all these ideas and all this feedback and these opinions constantly being thrown at us. I think that having a really clear goal and a clear vision, mine being to own a terrible baseball team, is my heat-seeking missile to know what I'm going to listen to and what I'm not going to listen to. And then cutting out the noise that doesn't lead me on that path and surrounding myself and doing whatever it takes to get around those who are thinking at that same level and have that a similar end goal or past that end goal. And again, doing whatever it takes to get around those individuals.
So you've got a huge event coming up in a couple of weeks here in Austin that's being held literally 50 yards from my balcony. So
Cool.
Right across the street with some very, very big names who are going to be speaking at that. And, you know, one, tell us a little bit about the event, who's speaking there, but most importantly, why you're holding the event and what role it plays in your goals here.
Yeah, that's the part of the story that I don't talk about publicly so much. So I'll open up about it. You know, about a year ago is when I had the realization that I was on a path that a lot of people thought was really cool, but it wasn't where I wanted to go and where I wanted to be. And that I had to start changing that network. And I wanted to start being around the billionaires and the 100 millionaires that would help demystify the path that was going to take me where I wanted to go. And I didn't feel like I had the network that would be able to do that. So what would be the thing that could help lead me down that path? And alongside that, I've always had this dream that seemed impossible to me, maybe silly to some, of being on stage and having events. And this was something that, for whatever reason, I was really afraid to do. And so I knew I had to do that. And once again, I made a whole bunch of mistakes on the way to doing it and planning it. But I said, okay, what I'm going to do is get over my fear of planning an event and couple it with paying the people that I want to hang out with, whatever it will take to show up at this event, because it's a good excuse for them to come and hang out with me on stage for, even if it's 90 minutes. They'll have to know who I am. They'll have to see what I do. And they'll have an audience that I put in front of them in order for them to spread their message. That at least will get my foot in the door for hanging around those that I want to be around in order to break the mold of the next level of my thinking. And along the way, I'll provide a lot of value for the people who are in the audience as well. But the seed of that idea came from, I need to get around those who think way differently than me. And I don't know if you can hire them, but I'm pretty sure they take speaking fees. So I'll pay them whatever it costs to come find out who I am and what we're about.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, essentially you're just, you know, becoming the cheese. You know, instead of the mouse like chasing after the cheese or, you know, whatever it may be, you're just going to put the cheese out, you know, with an awesome invitation and bring all of those people to you, which is great.
Yeah, you know, I've heard it said, and I think this is good advice, that when you're hiring someone, just go find out who the best in the world is at what you want accomplished and find out whatever it will take to get them to work for you. So I took that same idea when it came to, I guess you could call them mentors, really just people I wanted to become like. And whatever it would take is, most of them have speaking fees. So I got in touch with their agents, found out what they were, and paid them to show up. And you can ask me in a few weeks if it changed my paradigms, but I expect it to do that, and especially for the people in the audience.
So who are some of the people that will be speaking?
So the first person we contacted and we got was Gary Vaynerchuk, because he's on the same path as me to own a major league sports franchise. And he's a lot closer to it with his network and his net worth than I am. And we brought in Grant Cardone. Grant Cardone owns about $350 million in real estate. And the reason why we booked him was because I heard him on a show mention that he owned $350 million in real estate. I didn't know who the heck he was, but I said, that's a pretty good down payment on the Cleveland Indians, $350 million. So I just sought him out and was like, I want you to talk about this because it will impact me and it will get me closer to X goal, and paid him what it cost to show up. We then got Robert Herjavec from Shark Tank, A, because he's worth over $100 million, and B, because he invests in disruptor type of companies that have the potential to impact millions of people. And he does it publicly on a show like Shark Tank. And so I wanted to find out, okay, what's the difference between somebody like me or my audience who's comfortable at the $1 million level, you're at the $100 million level, and you build a lot of multi-million dollar companies. What's the difference between us? And then along the way, when somebody heard that I was planning this event, I was introduced to Jeff Hoffman, the founder of Priceline.com, a billionaire who believes that entrepreneurship and capitalism is the way that we make the biggest change in the world. And that was the philosophy he took into building Priceline.com and Ubid and the other businesses that he's been a part of. And so I asked him to come in and talk about those disruptor type of companies and how we have to think in order to build them. And then I brought in a series of my mentors, some of which I think have been on the show. And I had them on in order to help my audience demystify some of the impossible things that were impactful for me. So we built a mix of my mentors and then the people I'm trying to be like. I don't even know if those who are paying to show up know that that's the that's the reason why I chose them. But I figured if we could get them all in the room at the same time, that we would break paradigms and demystify kind of that next level, because I know that's what I needed as an entrepreneur and probably what the marketplace needed too.
That's awesome. So how many people do you expect to attend?
We're expecting 500 people.
Okay, awesome. And do you mind if I asked how much you guys charge for a seat?
Yeah, I hate to turn it into a pitch, but it's $1,500 a seat. I do have a discount link set up for Self-Made Man. But
cool. And just to give the audience a heads up on this, I didn't even know Ryan was holding this event until 5 minutes before we jumped on this podcast. So I'm not asking to kind of pitch the event or anything like that. For me, I'm very curious in the strategy behind why you're holding the event. And so this is not not an intentional pitch for the event, which by the time this show airs, even if it's next episode, it's going to be probably 30 days away. So let me just ask you, because I would definitely like to attend, and if there are people listening to this who want to attend as well, are there seats still available?
Yeah, there are.
Okay, cool. Well, then I'll make sure that we mention the link to go to grab those, and we'll put one in the post here as well. So, I love the strategy, and
ultimately, I wanted to figure out, I wanted to just demystify the path for this dream that I have that I currently see as impossible. And I know that it's not, in the same way that, I probably have a mental block around my abs showing, right? I've never been able to get a six pack, probably because I don't hang around enough people who work hard on their fitness. So as a result, you kind of fall to the common denominator that you hang around. And I knew for me that I had to just do something different in order to shake up the results that I was getting. And this was the path that I decided to go in order to bring the impossible into the possible for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And a podcast is a great way to do that as well. By having individuals like yourself and others come on the show, it's an hour that I get to spend with, someone new every single week that I want to learn from and that is a master at something, in their life, whether it's love and relationships or business or fitness. And it's a great way to establish new relationships that I may have not met before. So for me, that was one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to start the Self-Made Man podcast is to really serve that same purpose of expanding my personal network. So I totally get it. From a revenue standpoint or a business standpoint, have you figured out exactly yet, what you want to do moving forward as far as that aspect goes, what you're going to sell, what you're going to produce, or is that really still in the ideation phase for you?
Yeah, I'd feel disingenuous if I acted like I knew exactly what the path was, but I know where I create the most value in the marketplace. And focusing on that gives me the ability to cut out things that aren't necessarily in line with that skill set or that purpose. And when you're clear on that, then you know which opportunities to take on and which to avoid. So right now, to be honest, most of the opportunities that are thrown at me are on the surface look like great opportunities, but I know I need to turn them down because I can't see a clear way of how that leads me down the path to where I ultimately want to be. It's probably only 2 to 5% of the opportunities that come up either as an investor or as a partner or as a piece of a new business or a new direction of a business. Only 2 to 5% of those really lead me down or open up certain doors that I think will make my dream more possible. So the practice of saying no is becoming increasingly important. And to be honest, that's a muscle that I'm still kind of building. But that transition point is important in order to start switching over to the opportunities that will ultimately lead you towards the place that you want. And it's never an easy thing or a fun thing to make that transition. And I feel like I'm complaining about being at the $5 or $10 million level, which sounds really, really selfish. But that transition of what is going to lead me to that it has to happen, and things have to change if you're going to be in alignment with the end goal that you ultimately want to have.
Yeah, agreed. Where is your biggest blind spot right now? Where is your biggest weakness personally that you are aware of and that you've either got to address or you've got to find someone, to bring onto the team to address that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest challenge that I have is either the leadership of a team, because I'm so used to being a solopreneur by myself. So I struggle with the ability to lean on others, although I'm actively making mistakes to alleviate that problem. And so having the implementation team of it. I think the other thing, though, that is a muscle that I still have to stretch that I'm really weak on is evaluating the risk-reward ratio of projects and opportunities. If you're going to be a billionaire, if you're going to build a business that changes the world, that requires a certain amount of investment in not just finances, but both time and energy. Are you willing to go 5, 10 years without a tangible result in order to build something much bigger than yourself? And to be quite honest, the people I hang out with and the industries that I've been a part of aren't willing to make that type of an investment. So I've got this kind of blind spot of putting in more than about 18 months of unrewarded hard work before I see a really big result from that. I'm okay putting in about a year into something, but in order to go a lot bigger, am I willing to put in the 5 or 10 years that it might take? in order for a truly breakthrough company to change the world, I don't know that I can honestly say yes to that. And that's partially why I knew I needed to get a new network in order to find out, is that assumption even true? Is it going to take me 10 years of hard work with no result in order to build that end goal? I don't know, because I've never been a billionaire before, so I better get around some. Is it true that I need to do XYZ in order to get to that part? I don't know. So I better get a new network that can help illuminate that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I'm in the same boat. So, I have my vision, and I figured out what my opportunity is from, as far as how to create a disruptive business that can really change the world in a major way. And I'm executing on that, but I know that my biggest blind spot, like you, is that I've never built a huge team that can run and support, $100 to $300 million plus, per year company, that does business all over, on, multiple continents around the world and everything that comes, along with that. And so I had a great, on top of that, is that even something that I want to do?
Right.
Is the bigger question. And so I had a really cool opportunity to have lunch with Gary Keller, the founder of Keller Williams Real Estate. And they do, probably $5 to $10 billion a year in real estate. Actually, a lot more than that, because I know just one of David Osborne, who we've had here on the show, is their biggest distributor or rep, if you will, and they do multiple billions. So anyway, the guy's a billionaire, and he owns the largest privately owned real estate company in the world. And so he's here in Austin. I had an opportunity to have lunch with him last week. And the purpose of the lunch was to tell him about, the hydroponics business and to see if he would want to play a role in the company, either as an advisor or an equity partner, whatever it may be. And the biggest question that he had, during the meeting was, directed towards me and Mike, what do you personally want to do when it comes to the business? Do you want to launch this and have an exit, fairly shortly? Or do you want to, build this for the next 10 to 20 years and make this your magnum opus, if you will? Because if that's the case, I know exactly how to do that, and I can help you really, really well, because that's what I've done with Keller Williams. And if you're, just looking to, launch this company and to hand it off to others who want to do that and who are, much more experienced at that, then that's fine too. But, that's not my skill set. And so that really put me in a position where I've got to sit down and I've actually got to figure out, what do I want? And the thought of me running the business and growing it for the next 10 to 20 years is unbelievably scary, because I have no idea how to do that. Yet at the same time, by expanding my network, I now have an opportunity to work alongside a billionaire who has done it. And, he's right here in my backyard, which is really, really neat. So, I think we're on a very similar paths right now with very similar challenges that we've come to as a very similar solution for, which is to put yourself, within contact and within reach, individuals who have already done what you are seeking to do at the moment.
Yeah. And doing whatever it takes to get around them. I think you came into a conversation like that with value that you could provide with either your network, your audience, equity in a company. And so many think that those types of contacts are untouchable because they're approaching it from a take mentality of, what can I extract from this person? But when you have something to provide, or at the very least you're on a direction where they can assist, it opens up those conversations. But I also think, we as kind of solopreneurs, or those who have at least begun as solopreneurs, we're so used to it all being on our shoulders that we don't know how to rely on a team or partners or even mentors sometimes in order to achieve the things that are beyond ourselves, because we got into this game in order to create a better lives for ourselves, which is great. But when it's all about ourselves, we can't build the company we want, and we can't build the impact that we want, and we never get out of the business itself. And I'm just kind of rapping out loud with you, but it's something I'm now conscious of, but am not. It's still hard for me to get out of that mentality and then lean on those who can help assist me growing beyond where it is. And that's kind of the muscle that you have to develop if you really want to impact the world with a business.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think a huge part of this as well, which is a very, very conscious decision on my part, when I left the Elevation Group, I was like, I'm never going to start another business again that is dependent upon me as the personality. And, self-made man is certainly dependent upon me, but this isn't my business. It's not my focus. This is just a passion project. So, that I don't mind. But I made that decision to pursue a physical business with a physical product that was not dependent upon me to promote it, create it, sell it, whatever else is involved in that process, because there's no escape from that. So I think it's one of the easiest businesses to start in the world if you master a skill set and start to teach others those skills. But it's one of the most difficult, if not impossible, to escape from. Robert Kiyosaki is going to have a very hard time selling Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Tony Robbins is going to have a very hard time, ever selling, his business. So I think that's an important consideration set when you're sitting down here figuring out what you want to do next.
Yeah. And the one thing that it does give you, the one, I think, pivot point that having a business like that does is it gives you certain assets in the form of skill sets and a network that you can use to leverage into something else. My best friend in the world, his name is Mark Jenny. And he was kind of stuck in that exact same spot that I think I'm in and you're starting to transition out of, which is exactly what we're talking about. But by using the skill set that he had developed in one business, he's now building a company with valuations in the hundreds of millions. And that skill set served him really well. But what's interesting is he's my best friend, and so I get to watch him very closely. And I watch those who are around him. And those who are around him who are used to that cash flow business where they know what to do to make cash, but they've never leveraged that skill set to do something else. I've watched them over the last couple of years, and they're doing the same things over and over. And they've actually come to me and said, how did you get unaddicted to the money in order to move into something bigger? Because they're operating in this place of a few $1 million, which again is great. I hate to like bemoan a few $1 million, but they're used to the cash flow, and they've never taken the uncomfortable risk or challenge of leveraging that into something else, of taking the leap into what's scary because you're not familiar with it, because you haven't done it before, but will impact way more people, serve more people, create a bigger impact, and ultimately be worth a lot more. But they haven't been willing to make that transition because they're comfortable at a certain level. And I think that's the case with all of us in every area of our life at certain points, in relationships or in fitness or whatever it is. We reach this point in which we might do something different and enjoy a certain amount of success. But if we're not willing to leverage that to get just as uncomfortable as we were when we started our first business and get that uncomfortable again, moving towards something else, then we never really grow. And if we're not growing, then we're dying and we're retracting. And it's been very interesting to watch the entrepreneurs like yourself who have leveraged skill sets and networks to go towards something else versus those who get a skill set and then expect to be done. And they just say, I'm cool with this and I'm not going to grow anymore and I'm not going to get uncomfortable anymore. And just watch how that mentality affects their businesses, their relationships, their fitness. And it's a completely different path on either end. And for me, I just want to be in the one that is just as comfortable taking risk as I was when I started my business, but carrying that through every area of my life and at every checkpoint or plateau that I hit.
Awesome. It's a cool path to be on, man, to be able to believe in yourself enough and the vision that you have to do whatever you need to do and to be willing to take those risks to go for it, which is awesome. So Ryan, this has been fantastic, man. Where can people go to learn more about the event or to connect with you and either get on your newsletter or follow you on social media? Where should people go?
Yeah, my website and my podcast is called Freedom Fastlane. It's at freedomfastlane.com or just on iTunes. And the event is Freedom Fastlane Live, and there's still some discounted tickets available at freedomfastlanelive.com/selfmademan.
Awesome, brother. And guys, I don't get any kind of commission or anything for that link. That's just going to be some kind of value that we can provide you and basically say thank you for listening to Self-Made Man in the show. So Ryan Moran, thank you so much for joining us here today. This was awesome. Best of luck to you, and I am sure I will be seeing you in a couple of weeks here across the street at the JW Marriott in Austin, Texas.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.